We're back in an exciting unit called The Introduction to the Types and Methods of Creating Sculpture. Wow, what an amazing subject area. Sculpture has been the major art form next to painting that each artist has used to express himself or herself. And there's a realism to it because it has mostly three dimensions. All, all sculpture is not three-dimensional, but we're going to talk about the different types of sculpture, and then we're going to talk about how each type is made. So at the end, we want to give a quiz where you just identify what type of material it is. So first, let's review what is meant by the visual arts. Sculpture is one of five. First, we have painting, and you all remember painting includes oil, watercolor, acrylics, fresco, and it's usually put on a two-dimensional presentation. Two-dimensional meaning a painting. A painting has length and width. But then we have sculpture, and sculpture is different in that it not only constitutes length and width, but also length, width, volume, mass, and weight if it's a three-dimensional piece of sculpture. Very much like sculpture is architecture. The only thing is that architecture is a piece of sculpture built not necessarily as a piece of sculpture, but it has a building that has a functional use, and of course there are all kinds of creative ways in designing them. Then we have the visual arts. We have photography, and there are two types of photography, if we recall. First, we have still photography, and then we have motion photography. We used to have film photography, but now most people use digital cameras, and we're able to get digital software so that we can manipulate photographs, enhance them, do all the things that they used to do in the photo lab. Last but not least is the very one we just talked about. Digital computer graphics. I mean, it's on our cell phones, it's on in everything that we do. We are seeing commercials, we're seeing ways in which they deceive giants walking on the land where little people are. All that, we used to call it camera trickery, but now it's done by digital graphics. But back to sculpture. What are the four basic kinds of sculpture? This is very important. First, we have high relief. And I want you to put this in your notes. We have high relief. And these are figures which are joined to a base surface. I'm going to show you examples of that very shortly. And then we have low relief. And that's when you have a coin or you have any kind of monetary coin, and particularly with the quarter, for an example, raised up is the head of George Washington. Another relief they have is called bas relief, B-A-S-R-E-L-I-E-F, bar relief. And that's when we dig down into the surface. When we were kids, we used to have a cement sidewalk, and before it was dry, we'd come and make a stick, and we'd put a little message on it. That's what we call bas relief. The line makes a shadow, therefore it makes it darker. But the one that we're most concerned about, most pieces of sculpture, is called sculpture in the round. And sculpture in the round is anything or any object that can be walked around. So it just doesn't include art objects. It's cars, it's chandeliers, it's computers, it's chairs. And whenever you can walk around it, that means you can go around it 360 degrees. And the sculptor had an argument with the painter. The painter said, well, I can come up with 2,000, I can come up with millions of colors. But the sculptor said, I can come up with all kinds of colors by changing the light. And then I can come up with 360 different views of the same piece of sculpture, because as you move around a degree at a time in the circumference of a circle, you automatically see 360 different perceptions and directions and views of a piece of sculpture. So the sculptor says, I can give you color and I can give you numbers of the same form. Last but not least, we have what is called light sculpture. Sometimes it gives the illusion of volume using light, and sometimes you can be, after the World Trade Center was destroyed, a sculptor got together and took two lights and had a showing where both lights were shining up directly into the sky, as if to imply the volume of the World Trade Center. So it's important you understand these four types of sculpture: high relief, low relief, sculpture in the round, and light sculpture. Very important. Then we go to some of the types of media that is used to create sculpture. Sculpture can be created by what we call pliable means, like snow and clay, but also with all kinds of materials: wood, metal, marble, wire, glass, steel. I know a man made a fortune as a sculptor. He was a welder. He would weld bumpers of cars together to make interesting abstract shapes, and he became a very wealthy man out of Chicago. Paper is paper sculpture, because when you turn it around, it becomes a three-dimensional form. I remember an artist by the name of Sam Gilliam, and they didn't know whether he was a painter or a sculptor because he used to paint his roles and his turns in the work that he did. And so you didn't know whether it was three-dimensional or two-dimensional. George Siegel uses plaster, and I'll mention that in another lecture later on. And the Egyptians used granite and limestone, and it was very useful. The Egyptians believed that stone was eternal. So here we have an example of high relief. It's coming off of the background, and this is very important. It was used during the classical period of Greece and all the way through to show various scenes at theological points of view. The Egyptians, when we talked about the sun god Ra and the rays coming down, but here we have sort of like a bas relief. And then there's this very famous piece of three-dimensional, 360 degrees. It's known by everyone just about. It's called The Thinker by Augusto Rodin. And he, there are many works that he did, but The Thinker is one. We've already studied Michelangelo's David, and that was carved out of marble. And of course, the Africans, in West Africa particularly, they only had trees, and most of their sculpture tended to be vertical because it was carved from trees. So we see this multiple figure carved out of a single piece of wood. Paul Jacobson did a piece of sculpture he calls the Alfa Romeo Ferrari car, and he painted it real red, but he put it together. And Henry Moore is a very famous sculptor. If you go to the Museum of Modern Art, go out into the garden, you'll see a lot of Henry Moore's work. You can tell it's abstraction. You can see the head, you can see the shoulders, you can see the knees, and yet it is a beautiful abstract form. This Mercedes, you may not think you think it's a moving machine, but really it's a beautiful piece of sculpture. And as we talked about it in class, look at the reflection there. See, if you're sharp, you'll pick up right away. That reflection is not the same as what we see in the car. So this is what we call perception, and we try to do that as much as we can in our art instruction. But in industrial design and in architecture, this slogan is used over and over again. Form follows function. In other words, it should look like what it has to do, but it's still three-dimensional, and it is still a piece of sculpture. Look at this bench. Look at the chandelier. All these represent three-dimensional shapes that we are intrigued with as we look at them. The chandelier on the left, the bookcase on the right, the carving on the left. So what we're going to do in the next, I'm going to give you 40 different pieces of sculpture, pictures of sculpture. And this is our little quiz. And this is the easiest quiz you will ever have. All you have to do is write down from 1 to 40. And then what I want you to do is put your name and your last 4 digits of your student ID number. And then I want you to write down, as you look at each piece of sculpture, how was it made? What is the material? And you can just do it in notation form. Now, there are 40 of these. And sometimes you just have one-word reactions. And I want you to enjoy what you do. You're making choices here. You're making decisions, but you're also being informed and educated about the different types of sculpture. So, in our quiz, I want you to open that up, the quiz on sculpture, and then I want you to take these 40 images that are in a Camtasia presentation, and I want you to write down from 1 to 40. And then as you look at each one, I just want you to jot down, how is it made? For an example, that cabinet on the right is made of wood. The fireplace there looks like marble. The chandelier looks like glass. And these are things that I want you to do as we complete and understand what is meant by sculpture.